Welcome everybody for our second series of our CFO Roundtable digitally. And today we are going to look specifically to the healthcare industry, and we have 5 people joining us. Let me quickly introduce them and I'll go around the table. So we have Rohit Anand joining us from GE Healthcare, where he is CFO for South Asia. We have Ajay Luharuka, if I say that correctly, from Cipla, who is CFO for their Indian business. We have Vinay Jain, who is CFO at Medtronic for India subcontinent. Felix Das, the CFO for Novartis India. And we have Manish Vora, who is Executive Director, VP and CFO for J&J India. So thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us. And all who is listening in, thank you also for joining us today. So let me start a little bit with an open question, and I'm asking this question to Manish specifically. We of course are in a situation which is quite difficult today, and I think it's easy to go around the table and see what are the issues we are raising, but there are also some opportunities in the market, and it's not only doom and gloom in front of us. There's also a couple of things been going well. So Manish, you had some views on that.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas, and hello to all co-panelists and all the participants. It's absolutely a gloom and doom time, but what is most important is to remain positive during this time. I came across a poem today morning, and with your permission, Nicholas, I would like to share that with the rest of the group, which was actually published in 1869. And was reprinted in 1919, and it is so relevant even as on today. Would you mind if I share that with the group?
Go ahead, Manish.
Thank you so much. And here it goes. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some made their shadows. And the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth also began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed as well. So these are absolutely unprecedented times, right? And in this gloom and gloom, you will always find those opportunities which will be striking for us to not only look at from a business perspective, but individually as a human being as well, right? So with that positivity, I give it back to you, Nicholas.
Yeah. So Manish, while you're speaking, I recognize myself a little bit in a lot of these aspects, especially the dancing piece, which I actually started a little bit myself. Just want to see what are the opportunities you see for J&J in this market?
So, Nicholas, the way, when the winds of change are there, you can either build a wall or you can build windmills, right? So currently we are in those time where we are looking at to see as to whether we can build windmills, and we are seeing a lot of opportunities which will come up. J&J is a diversified business. Obviously, we have pharma sector, we have medical sector, and we have consumer health sector. And as we see the new ways in which the behavior is going to change, a lot of opportunities will definitely emerge. We need to adjust and be agile to new ways of looking at, like say, antibacterial space, right? I mean, it is so relevant currently that space is very important for us to look into, and that will be true for all my peer colleagues as well who are in the pharma sector, and absolutely help the lifestyle changes which are going to happen. So obviously the sector in which we are in is absolutely relevant as on today and will continue to remain, but there will be new areas which will emerge, new ways of go-to-market models which would emerge, and we need to keep our eyes and ears open into new insights and see as to how best we are able to capitalize on that and not build a wall but build windmills, as I said.
Build windmills, exactly. Yes. So my surname is actually Windmill, if you would it in English. So I understand everything of that. So I open it to the group specifically. Well, from a finance perspective, looking at the company you are working in, and of course everyone works in slightly different industry, although the overall industry is healthcare. What do you see specifically as something where you can actually change some things today, which will also have impact for the future and probably will be lasting changes? So Ajay, you maybe have some views on that.
Sure, Nico. Thanks for the question. Nico, I Manish mentioned, and in fact, we were exchanging some messages in the morning today. I think in the current times, it's extremely important to be thankful for what we have and also be in gratitude completely, so that with this positive approach, we only then will be able to move forward. I personally believe that there will be some pain in the near term, and you have to take care of the near term. It's extremely important to also reimagine what happens in medium to long term perspective. What will happen after 6 to 9 months and a year, therefore. I think along with the business, we are able to work together and think about a lot of solutions which will not only shape the industry, which will also help us to move forward. Inherently, I think the pharma.
Ajay, can you be a bit more specific? What are these changes? That's what our audience wants to know.
Yeah, I'm going to that. So especially for pharma, I think the entire way a doctor engages with the patient today, that will change completely. The way a pharma company engages with the doctor, that will change. And we also foresee a lot of changes in the distribution channel. If I have to take one, each one at a time, the way a doctor engages with the patient today, I think we are already seeing a shift from physical consultation to teleconsultation, for example. There will be an integrated care approach to the entire way a patient is consulted, right from providing online consultation to getting a prescription online, placing orders online, and then getting the delivery. And in the midst of all of this, also the diagnostic support to the patient will be an important look after. Similarly, the way a pharma company engages with the doctor will also change drastically. Today, we are used to conferences and meetings and doctor visits. I think e-detailing will become extremely important going forward. And I think our entire shift will be now to knowledge building, content sharing, and obviously then product. I think all these things will make a huge difference going forward. There was a BCG report on the China experience, and they shown that there's been a manifold increase in the number of tele-prescriptions which has come after the pandemic, a manifold increase in the number of teleconsultations happening, as well as online pharmacies. I think all these will make a huge difference. And on the distribution side, what I feel is that the last mile delivery, which is today a challenge in the Indian industry, that could become a big game changer for a 3PL player, for example. You could see the equivalent of a Swiggy coming into deliveries on the last mile. So some of these things I think can make a huge impact in the way we foresee pharma industry shaping up in the next 6 to 9 months at least.
So I've heard this Swiggy, Zomato currently also now giving this last mile delivery in place. Is any one of you using this today in their operations?
Can I share?
Yeah, Felix, you want to say something?
No, not me. We don't use Swiggy. We've not gone there.
Okay, why is that, Felix?
There is still a risk that these are medicines carrying, right? So as far as pharmaceutical items are concerned, it's also important that they're carried in the right environment and that these are not misused, because these are temperature controlled items. Yes. And for any reason that care is not taken, right now we can control the people who carry it for us. Right now we know what's happening. We get a measure of temperature at the start and temperature at the end. It's a pretty well regulated. Once you give it to Swiggy and you have n number of people carrying it, it's just managing this is going to be a little difficult. So it's a lot of compliance work, and I think it's important that between the service provider and the company, we clearly lay guidelines as to what our expectations are and where the risk is, because this also impacts human life. So are we ready, and are they ready to do that? Is something takes a little time till we align with these service providers.
Maybe Nicholas, I can add to that. While in medical devices the delivery is not possible, but what can be done is as a different mode of a sales model. So currently the current models are distributor and channel partners and direct to hospitals. But the other models is the e-commerce model where the customers can actually log into the platform and like in Amazon or anything can order the product. So that has started to happen in more smaller products like a surgical products. That started to happen and we have started to go in that direction. So there is an e-commerce kind of a role coming into medical devices as well, but far more lesser than the pharma and medicine delivery. But yes, it is because the customers are B2B and they're actually interacting on the platform to be able to order. And given that the whole sales model is going to change, you can't physically go to hospitals too many times and you can't really reach. And that's an option that is given to even the smaller hospitals or the tier 2, tier 3 town hospitals where they can actually order through online and use the product. So there is an option.
So one other aspect I understood from Ajay is the fact that there's digitalization in the way you connect with your customer, whether that's the hospital or whether that's the immediately doctor. Rohit, in GE, what have you done on this front?
Yeah, so I think I'll just take up from what Vineet was saying. I think the whole go-to-market, if you look, is going to change. It was done in bits and pieces, but now it's going to be radically changed. So think about the first connect's going to be through online marketing campaigns, right? That will follow up with inside sales channel, which will get the leads to a cold to a warm position. And then it will be followed with those customers who are interested with online demos. With the online demos, you will have conversion in most cases with limited visits. And post that, in complicated equipment like ours, with Vineet and I deal with on a medical equipment side, we'll be able to make the sale as we move forward and people will start getting comfortable. Even post sales, after the installation is done, we have a product that we've done on the digital side, which is post sale app support. So, we link ourselves with a panel of the equipment and then we can remotely monitor live cases with the doctor and we can help them with any questions that they have from a technology standpoint. We did this product a couple of years back and now with this change that we see in COVID, it's really, really important because it also is important that we safeguard the health of our employees as well. So limited visits from their side, all that helps protect that as well as add digital solution to the customer. So that whole paradigm is going to change. Then once you've sold the equipment, Nicholas, it's going to be post-sale monitoring and services, right? That also is going a lot digital because you can do a preventive maintenance, you can online monitor the asset. So before it goes or conks off, you could really remote fix it. So we monitor our remote fix percentages. We kind of make sure that the assets get heavily connected. It's much more percentage in the private industry side, but government still low. But we're pushing that agenda. And if that happens, we can remotely monitor, fix in a lot of cases, plus avoid, instead of 3 visits from a field service executive, we can have it done in 1 visit. Right. So I think all of those will change. And, with that, the touch points or the visits and online monitoring keep on going.
Okay. So in this, I've always been amazed when I came to India about the huge number of sales reps pharma companies have in this market. Do you feel that will in some way replace these roles and maybe you're looking at different type of people in the market that can manage the relationships with doctors digitally and probably on a different level?
So, Nicholas, if it's for me, I think we are in more of medical equipment space, less of pharma. I think the pharma folks will answer here, but from our side, I would say people will have to upscale. So it's not in India from a market perspective has a huge accessibility issues, right? So it's not, we're still not penetrated. We still have demand for healthcare equipment, the penetration for oncology, the need for oncology, the need for heart care in terms of coronary diseases, all that is very high. So hence we need those equipments to be delivered, set, installed. So we would still need people, I would say. The demand's still huge in the market. But I think people will have to upscale. People will have to upskill themselves. People will have to change to the new times. Will have to understand their role and hence the productivity will go up. So if a person was earlier making 10 visits to one customer to close a deal, he'll have to do that in 3 visits and then hence he can close 3 more deals, right? So I think that will evolve, and as well as the skills. So if he was just a generic sales guy, maybe he has to upgrade himself to know about the product much more, and be able to talk that language. So I think those productivity areas will definitely come.
Okay. Felix, you're on mute, I think.
Nico, if you can add to that.
Yeah. If I could add to what Rohit mentioned.
Felix,
think,
and Ajay. Go ahead.
Yeah. You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So what I wanted to add to Rohit is the quality and expectations of the salespeople technically by the doctors is also going to change. It's not just that 1 minute where you talk about the product. You got to talk more than the product, talk science to the doctors. And to talk science, I think you have to definitely be at a different level. This may not be necessarily shared with, say, digital brochures and brochures. It's also the way the salespeople actually convey and market the benefits and the science of that product and how it can be used better. With that, it is going to be there. It is a challenge for the reps to upgrade themselves technically, technologically. Like, right now we're living in a situation where, it's remote connection with the doctors. This is a good time to actually pilot these to figure out how each one is doing and what the doctor's expectations are. So right now is a good learning for everybody and for the organization, and where we need to either invest or contribute in upgrading, or also assessing what are the skill sets and what are the doctors in fact looking for. Is it just necessarily personal presence and a brochure? Or is it more to kind of connect with these people to understand the product better?
Ajay, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. So, Nico, what I want to mention is that while the number of visits by these, sales rep will come down probably, I think we'll have to complement it by, something which we call as digital therapy managers. And, a lot of e-detailing will have to be done by the digital therapy managers. And again, statistics based on the Chinese experience show that the e-detailing piece has gone up considerably. And what you're saying is right. We'll have to literally, think on how this relationship piece with the doctors will, shape up going forward, because e-detailing won't be as effective as, a person going and physically meeting a doctor. So I think it has to be a blended approach of, having a physical contact and supplementing it with, e-detailing.
And if I have to add to Ajay, it is also that Indian doctors are also currently not used to having e-detailing and digital connects, right? They are also used to high touch points, right? In terms of having and connecting with the scientific emanation of information through reps. So this model will evolve as we kind of go through in next 6 to 12 months time, right? And we need to see whether, digital connect and e-connect will be here to stay. It will be, but will it be 100%? Will it be go back to the earlier mode where it will be say 5%? I think it will be more than that. It will be somewhere in between. But we will have to be living with this hybrid approach of connecting and doing e-detailing both, right? And that is where probably the new era of prescription writing and other things is going to come from. That's what I would feel.
Okay, thank you. Let me set up a poll once, if Sophia can put up the poll, and it's a little bit in the spirit of what's happening today, vocal for local. So just want to see how much of the finished goods are actually produced in India in your industry, whether that's the capital equipment, the medical devices, or the pharma products. So while we're going through this, maybe looking a little bit at supply chain in detail, and maybe starting with Vineet, how do you go about your supply chain?
Look, so on supply chain, as far as we are concerned, we import everything right now. So there is everything gets imported, and that it gets imported from different countries of the world, right? Depending on the product to product, we have the manufacturing facilities across. So currently, if I look at the challenge, obviously when the pandemic happens, and then in the middle of March when everything was locked down, obviously the immediate challenge was how do we secure supply chain, right? To get the product in India and also get it distributed across the country. And now for us, the big challenge was to not only to get it in India because of the challenge across the globe and the countries were locked down, the airlines were not working. The second was, even if we were able to get it in India, the next challenge was to get it released from the customs and other authorities, including the drug authorities. I think that took about 2 weeks of time when the first lockdown happened. Post that, things started to become normal. But I think the big challenge continue to have is distribution across the country, right? So you still do not have the flights running between the smaller cities and big cities to be able to reach the products into the smaller cities and tier 2, tier 3 cities. And the second is you do not have a road transport, which is, while the medical supplies are still under the essential category, but there is still not many distributors are working, not many hospitals are able to take these supplies. So I think that there was a big challenge to start with. Then I think gradually it became a little normal. But going forward, as a pandemic, obviously we'll have to live with this for some more time. But going forward, we'll have to look for different modes of supply chain. What's the optimum supply chain model for us, especially if we have to distribute under these constraints, given the fact that we actually import a lot of our products. So I think different companies will have a different approach. Even for those who are manufacturing in India, will have to really start thinking about actually expanding, because the kind of the government initiatives on going local, right? So I think for us, it's a different challenge, given that the entire product gets imported.
Okay. So, maybe someone wants to jump in there.
Yeah, I'll go, Nicholas, quickly. And I think especially around this season, the effort and the dependency on supply chain has been amazing. And their turnaround of each of these situations have been fantastic. And I'll tell you why. We faced exactly the challenges everybody else is facing. And this is exactly a right time to, when we talk of doing a fire drill, what exactly happens when an actual fire drill happens versus when you do a drill. You just have a drill to test whether people really walk out in 10 seconds. And when it's only a drill, you're easy about it. You have more than 10 seconds. You could walk around 100 floors, take your own time. There's no fire. This situation was a perfect definition to really test it because it just happened. And the best part over here, I think, is usually what happens between functions, between sales, supply chain, finance. You're usually kind of standing on the opposite side, pushing each other to make things happen. This time, we saw a perfect integration between all these functions, every one of them, from finance to supply chain to manufacturing to distribution, every one of them taking it as a team. And that's amazing. What happened in this process is the people involved and the people who actually deliver are completely motivated, knowing that they all stand as one. A lot of problems with Vineet mentioned were replicated with us. We had an opportunity to actually, an amazing supply chain. These guys actually would pick the phone and directly call if it's the ministry and if it's the airlines or even if it's the airport to ask them what exactly the function and problem is, because our products have to necessarily come in a certain controlled temperature. And I remember when the initial happened that there was no facility at the airport to provide us with that cold storage. And the reason was because the people or the clients or the customers would actually use the facility and not move the products, because of which the other companies who could actually facilitate were not possible. So it exactly required our supply team getting and supporting the airports to see how we could move these items out so that we could keep the business running. And pharma being an important requirement across the globe, it was important that we do everything out of the way. That's a big learning, especially, and that's just one of the efforts. It also involved a lot of management involvement at different levels across the organization. Across the organization. And this involves, because these people who are in the distribution are normally interacting with first level managers. And here the only motivation was people at all levels of the organization getting in and actually talking to these people, even at the distribution level. And that's the biggest motivator, because then what happens was the importance of every function and every link in the chain is shown its importance. So that's a little bit on our supply chain piece.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. I like the concept of one team in crisis mode. When crisis is there, it's the best way to to get people come together. It would be nice that it happens in good times as well, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Nicholas, I'll talk a little bit on this if you don't mind.
So
from a supply chain perspective, just maybe a little bit of infrastructure. So we've got 3 plants in Bangalore, SG Healthcare. So we heavily, doing manufacturing out of the country. Plus, we started localization journey in India around 2014-15 time frame. So we're 25% of products are localized. Now that's one way to look at it. Second is how much are you penetrated in terms of localization, which is, are your suppliers local or are the suppliers still importing from outside the country, right? So that's developing the whole ecosystem from a healthcare perspective. So for us, I think that's been the critical focus, and the depth of penetration of localization varies between products that we localize from 10% to 30-40%, but not beyond. So that's an area that we're trying to work on, and obviously with the localization theme, with health sets that we have in the industry, and multiple other factors, I think the localization will get doubled down, and we will continue that journey.
So you have a team in place that specifically focuses on localization?
That's right. We've got strategic manufacturing role, which works on localization with the commercial folks, build the business case, and then pitch that to the global team. And we work that through the board process as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Great to hear.
Nico, can I add on the supply chain piece?
You can.
Thank you. So I would split this, the entire initiative on supply chain into 2 parts. What was done for near term, and something which we have to look at it from a long-term perspective also. From the near term, what we did was we tried to categorize our materials in terms of criticality, and all the high critical materials we tried to cover at least 3 to 4 months of inventory in the short term. So that will, that help to de-risk supplies to some extent, whether it is especially from China or, even from Europe. Similarly, we did the same kind of thing on packing materials which are critical for the production. On the other hand, what we did was we gave a lot of support to our vendors in terms of ensuring that they have continuity in their operations. And all of them, appreciated the kind of support Cipla has given, and they actually started manufacturing dedicatedly for us in this period. So I think that support was extremely helpful for the vendors. And the third thing is that while we have, simplification being done on all our SKUs, we again did a ABC classification of what are our top selling products, what is critical for the business, and what is priority. And we deprioritized the bottom rung of the entire SKUs, which we said, let's not complicate operations, keep them aside for the time being, we can come back to it later. That helped us to make sure that the top, 90-95% SKUs which contribute to the top portion of the business continues to be delivered, without any interruptions. And on the longer term, I think from a pharma perspective, a lot of dependency is on API from, Chinese companies and other areas. We'll have to obviously plan how do we de-risk ourselves in the long term and move API and to some extent intermediate manufacturing as well as KSMs to India. So we'll have to probably set up our own facilities. We'll have to tie up with some CMOs in India and, plan that over a 2-3 year period.
Is this already on the agenda, or these are still thought processes going on? If you can divulge, of course.
Yeah, so it's on the agenda, but I would say it's in planning stage.
Okay, good. So maybe Sophia, if you can put another poll on. This is a little bit about where the time of the CFO goes in these times. And we spoke about supply chain disruptions, of course, already. There's the internal piece, people and technology, customer and credit, overall cash, working capital management, and cost-cutting measures. So all of you would having probably when the crisis struck, first things first go. Apart from the cash management, the second piece would have been where can we cut in costs, and that's always an interesting exercise to go through because there's a lot of different stakeholders in that with different agendas. So what's the type of principles in your company that you actually apply to ensure that you take the right decisions for the long term?
Let me go there. So I think when the pandemic started, the first thing that we did obviously was, as a global guideline, we wanted to make sure that each one of our employees are safe, right? That was a specific guidance. One thing is very clearly communicated, that each one of our employees must be safe, and whatever needs to be done to ensure, whether it is to provide them kits, whether it is to provide them all the safety PPE equipments, everything, and then also to make sure that they, whenever they go out, the due care is taken. So I think that was number one. If I just talk about it during this period, if I say that what all we have been doing as a CFO and to make sure that the people are engaged. The second one was, I think we talked about upskilling in whether how do we use this time to really upskill ourselves in terms of training, whether if it is a finance person, obviously within the finance function domain, and also for a sales function and the clinical staff on the therapy itself, right? So there is a lot of focus that we spent in the last couple of months on these upskilling of our employees. I think the third one was how do we stay engaged and motivated, right? I think we had a lot of such Zoom webinars and whether it is what we call it happy hours, apart from the formal ones, right? We have all formal WebEx and Zoom, but we also had made sure that we stay connected with the team. We had a weekly connect with the larger and entire population of the company, right, on a weekly basis with the leadership team. I think with these three things, now as we go back to normal or go back to not normal, at least we start to go back post the pandemic and the lockdown 4.0, we started to think about how do we bounce back to the normal, right? How do we adapt to this new normal? So I think stage-wise, we have been actually focusing on these four things from an employee point of view and also for the organization. So I think safety first, and then everything else falls in place.
Okay. So when just going back, so the principle you had, Vineet, was specifically saying, okay, people first, and then we see how the cost-cutting measures come across. Is that what we're saying, or?
Absolutely. Like, no, when the last 2 months started happening, the first thing was absolutely people first, right? And we had our year end, and maybe have a different year end principles, but year end timelines. But post that, the idea was to really look back and think, what are the things that we can do without impacting people? So something which is very discretionary spend that you obviously want to make sure that you invest in the right direction. I think even though on the cost lines, it was more non-people, it is more something which is discretionary and can be avoided so that we can focus on the people and also the patients.
Anyone had a different approach? Because I guess people would be very, very central in most of your decision making, which is the same at Michael Page. So I
can add, Nicole?
Yes, you can.
So, it is so important for us to kind of, during these times, not lose focus on medium to long-term strategies for the organization, right? Because in short term, say next 6 to 12 months, there is a lot of pain. But every organization is built with its own values and culture, right? So we at Johnson & Johnson, just like what Vineet suggested, we absolutely kept people and community in the center. Right? So any cost which is related to either people or community or support to the government for that matter, there was absolutely no going back. Because, our company managing director at the world level always told that Johnson & Johnson is built for times like this, right? And that is where we thought that this is our opportunity as an organization to absolutely support, all our ecosystem. Having said that, what is also important is once you have these principles of ensuring that you protect the people, community, and support to the government, at the same time, these are the times, which are an absolute crisis situation. So as Churchill stated, that never waste a crisis, right? So this is our opportunity as well, and who better than finance to lead that effort in looking at opportunities that will increase the efficiency, the opportunities which will, look at new ways of doing things, which in normal course of business, when you are actually growing, you would kind of not look into. So there is this notion of fixed expense, right? So who has made it fixed? Us, right? So anything which is non-people, right? Is there an opportunity for us to look at anything and everything which is in fixed, and see as to are there any discretionary part in fixed, variable part in fixed? Of course, as Vineet also recommended, that all of us are also absolutely looking into. But at the same time, there is another part which is in supply chain cost, right? I mean, for us, almost 70% of our operation manufacturing is in India. I mean, we have 5 plants and multiple external manufacturing setup. And during this time, with social distancing, not only that number of people who can come to the factory is lesser based upon the government mandate, but also because of social distancing, even when they are there, the quantity they can produce is much lesser. So the capacity utilization absolutely goes down. In this scenario, how do you kind of move towards flexi structure? How do you ensure that your operations run at one go, and then you close your plants to save on the variable costs, right? So many measures that we have kind of implemented to move towards flexi structure. Normally you would see annual maintenance of our machinery as a time-based stuff. What we have tried to evolve is, can we do a meter-based stuff rather than a time-based stuff, where you look at the usage of the machinery rather than the if it is 12 months or 15 months, right? Is there a methodology in which, so we have tried to do a AI-based stuff to see if we are able to do the meter-based maintenance rather than a time-based maintenance. What can we do in terms of looking at the overtime, the shift? How do you mix your people? How do you reduce your dependence on external contractors during this time, and have your own people deployed differently to have maximum output from the same manpower cost, right? So, there are two components. One is on the plant side and other is on the OPEX side. And that is most important, that while we absolutely look at the short term, but never lose eye on what is right for the organization in medium to long term, because someday, sooner than later, the growth will come back. During that time, it is important for us to resize, reshape, but at the same time not lose the core.
Okay, thank you, Manisha. Just moving on from there, and I think this is an important aspect, because some of your customers could be hospitals, other ones it's the stockist, and then of course the end consumer. And a lot of them would be in financial distress, or at least in cash constraints. What do you do today to connect with your customer and to ensure that you can help him through these times, and of course by this helping yourself?
So let me start here. What we have done is, I'm connecting two questions here. One is on the digitization and customer together. So what we have done is, we have tried to create digital-based connects with all our customers, whether it be our distributors, whether it be our doctors, and try and see as to how do we make their life easier, right? So there is a command center which has been set up where the entire operations are run together in that particular manner, and all our area heads, our field people are in daily touch with our customers, are in touch with our doctors, to see as to what we can do to help them during this time, and to make their life easier. What we've done is, normally you would have a manual ways of collecting orders. We have kind of created a digitized way of collecting order. WhatsApp is a very common way, so we have created a WhatsApp based order system, whereby all our distributors, all our customers can actually log in through the WhatsApp and connect and send whatever they require, which connects back to our supply chain system. So the more efficient and easier ways in which we are able to make life for our distributors and our doctors easy is what we are trying to do. At the same time, continue to have that human touch, right, and continue to support them. I would agree with Ajay. We are also trying as much in Johnson & Johnson to support our ecosystem, right? Because as big organization, it is our responsibility to support our vendors, our customers during this time. So we are doing what we can to support and value add to our ecosystem and make their life easier. At the same time, have newer ways of communication.
Okay. So, yes, Felix, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little more here, and what we have also done. In addition to actually opening up the whole digital payment system, which we call as the automatic clearing house, which also was a requirement 1st of April, mandatorily. Now, the second one is having a stockist spread across the country and as big as about 3,000 stockists. Getting all on board overnight is not easy. If you have to get everybody converted to a digital. So there has to be an incentive also to kind of get these guys on board. So what we did is we formed a pilot group, picking a very specific area, which are not easy stockists to handle. It's running as we speak to see what are all the probable combination of questions or combination of challenges that we could face, and then address this and see if we can spread this across the country. In addition to this, while we are doing this and this is in process, we continue to get checks or what we call as a manual payments. To some extent, we also get online transactions. The problem and the difference between online transactions and the digital payout is online transactions not necessarily happen by the date they have to pay you. Unlike in the automatic clearing where, it's a mandate. It's a mandate which the stockists have to sign up. And with that mandate, it's like an EMI payment. By default, on that particular date, the payment goes. So the only motivating factor here which we have considered is we give them an additional discount, reduce the number of days. If we were giving them an X number of days plus a grace period for the clearances, we give them a slight additional cash discount, motivating them to come a little earlier and register with us. So in this particular situation, it also helps keeping the cash flow for both going, so that we don't need to probably waste time like what we discussed earlier on follow-up. So yeah, once the pilot kind of takes shape, we will be in a position to actually roll it across the country.
Yeah. Nico, if I can add.
Yes, you can.
So some of the things which, initiatives which we took to support stockists, which are primary customers in pharma, is that like Felix mentioned, we rolled out an incentive plan to give them additional credit, which helps them to tide over their working capital requirements. And most of the peers in our pharma industry did that as well. So that helped them, a lot in terms of making sure that they are having some breathing space to collect monies from their customers. Number two, we also gave a small incentive to convert the manual way of check payments into digital. And over the last 1.5 months, what we've seen is that digital payments have gone up by 2.5x. So I think that has been a very good, progress, and we hope that going forward it will increase further, and this factor will only help us to improve our operations, in future. And the third thing which we did for the stockists was that we held safety webinars for the stockists in terms of how they and their employees should take care of in this time. How should they use a mask, how should they use sanitizers, what kind of precautions they should take while handling stuff and all. So that initiative also was very well appreciated by stockists all across, because a lot of our earlier initiative was focused on doctors. We then also said, let's make sure that the stockists are also given the necessary support in terms of guidance on how to handle this.
Makes sense. So Rohit and Vineet, your customers are hospitals.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. Yeah. So from I'll just take a little bit view on the segment first. So if you look at our segment, Nicholas, that you mentioned, right, most of our customers are hospitals or diagnostic centers, right? And if you look at the market is split 70-75% as private segment and 25% is government, right, as a customer. So if you look at the market, even before the pandemic, what was happening is, look at two aspects. The profitability of these would vary between 6 to 7% OM to 14%, right? It ranged between the efficiency and productivity that they could drive, right? The way they operated. Second, if you look at cash, last 9 to 12 months, the pressure on cash was very, very high, because there's a lot of cash that is stuck with reimbursement schemes of the government. And also on the private public partnerships, a lot of these guys who've taken contracts, their reimbursements haven't come back, right? So there was a lot of strain on their working capital, which was deteriorating every day, plus whatever margin they made. Now with pandemic, if you look at what's going to happen to the industry, I think the operating margins with the hospitals hardly operating for just COVID patients to take care of them. All the elective procedures are not happening. And if you look at diagnostic centers, they're mostly shut or operating at 10% capacity. We have our services data, so we can see the running of the equipment. So with that, I think it's going to create a lot of pressure. It's going to be losses for most of the companies. Now the question is, do people have enough cash to take care of their losses, and for what period of time? So hence what we're doing, Nicholas, is working with all these customers and represent through industry forums, various forums, Nat Health and others, to go to customer, give very specific details, how much money, for which customer, where is it stuck, how can government really help us to unlock that and get it released wherever the commitments from the various parties are done, right? Either reimbursement schemes even for us if there's payment due from the government side. So government's been very proactive at that. They've taken all the details. In fact, we see some traction. In our case, we got some payments as well. I think that's going to help unlock a lot of bandwidth from a system standpoint. So that's one big piece that we're partnering with the customer. Second big piece is on all the key opinion leaders. So we have multiple key opinion leaders in the industry who know about their subject, somebody who's a cardiology expert. So we're doing a lot of sessions with those guys, with various cardiologists in the country, so that we can use this time, everybody's home, we can use this time to train and upskill and share that knowledge with various people. So those are the platform we're trying to get these guys, and then with smaller diagnostic centers who've been with us for a long time, seeing if we can help them on some schemes with the bank, given our financing connect. So make sure that, we give the financing solution with various banks and NBFCs and help them in getting that loans through on the working capital bridge side.
Okay. Thank you, Rohit. Vineet, you want to add something to this?
I would. I think some of the stuff are very common, so I would not repeat it, like digitization of the collections and all. But I think few things. I mean, if I break this again, government. I think Rohit mentioned about how we are actually working with the government to get the money, because there's a lot of money got stuck for hospitals. And for us, the customers is either the channel partner, which is the distributor, or the hospitals, which are the two big customers for us, and obviously the government directly. So what we're doing, let's say for our distribution partner, if I can just focus on there, and multiple options are being given from a working capital point of view, like whether it is a channel financing or an equipment financing, even directly to the hospitals, right? So what we have done is what it was actually done even before the pandemic, but I think it got accelerated in the recent time, because people are looking for options if they're not able to buy, because there's a lot of capex decisions are getting postponed. So there are a number of options are being given to the customers to how they can actually still buy while not invest cash on their own. So whether it is lease, whether it is pay for use, and multiple other options are being evaluated, and it's only going to accelerate. I'm not saying we have still used quite a bit, but it started, which is going to accelerate further. And in this short period of time, the channel partners are actually getting those channel working capital support. But I tell you, this is the most hot topic right now, especially given the challenge that Rohit mentioned, that there is no revenue coming for the hospitals for them to be able to pay back. So there is a financial stress on the hospital, which is our customer. And even for the government, they're actually diverting a lot of fund for the COVID-related fight, right? Whether it is ventilator buying or PPE buying. So the government funding is also not as fast as it should be.
And to top it all, Nicholas, we've got foreign exchange pressure to the country, right? The foreign exchange has moved to 75.56. I don't track what is today, but that creates the import more expensive. We've got the health cess that the government implemented recently. That's an additional pressure with the sector struggling. And then, we've got the freight. I'm sure everybody's experiencing it, but the inbound freight to the country with limited flights that are available is getting more and more expensive. So, how do you kind of, as an OEM, also bear all these cost pressures while you know the customer's position? So hence, we're all representing the government because we're also in the same situation to see how they can help the sector as such, because it's very important that we continue to float this entire segment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me move on to a couple of questions so that...
Nicholas, a quick point here.
Yeah, go ahead, Felix.
Not to forget that I think the insurance cost and the premiums have gone up sky high from the 1st of April. All of us will experience that, but the insurance cost of insuring our products is pretty high, either it be freight or even at the warehouse. All of us, I think the whole industry is affected by the insurance costs. Yeah.
Thank you, Felix. I'll ask this question to Ajay, as it is on the generic piece. So most of the Indian companies, this is a question from Kitan Gupta. Yep. So most of the Indian companies are in generic drugs, and US is the major market. One, do you think in the current scenario, US FDA will be lenient on India drug manufacturers? And do you think other markets will open up and reliance on US will reduce for you? For the India?
Yeah. Thanks, Ketan. We have already seen that some of the approvals which were pending with the FDA, those approvals have come in the last couple of months, and I don't know whether to call it lenient or not, but probably it's the need of the hour in US that you need more generic products. So probably that's that we are seeing already happening. We are also seeing that in terms of the plant inspections, there are various ways by which FDA is trying to expedite. And we also saw quite a few companies receiving EIRs and approvals from the FDA. We also working on potential remote audits, which can be done from their end. So I think, in general, there's been a lot of initiative from the US FDA to ensure faster approval as well as of products as well as of the plants.
Perfect. Other question. This is anonymous. This is about the latest best estimate, and I ask it to all of you because I think you all will be facing this problem. So you would have your forecast or whatever you call it. How do you look into the future so that we can take some decisions and find alternatives to mitigate losses? What are the key influencing drivers in these crucial times?
Can I start?
Yes, Manish, please.
This is, I hope and I wish that all of us had a crystal ball, right? But we can only make a educated guess the way the things are, right? I mean, we have seen in the past that, when such kind of pandemics or such kind of crisis, let's put it that way, that happens, that many times you see a recovery which is in a V shape or a U shape or a L shape, right? In my view, this time around, it is likely to come in a W shape, right? It is neither going to be a V, neither going to be a U. That's my view. Now, what does it mean? It means that, in short term, especially in India, what will happen is, since we had a sudden lockdown, right? You will see that the entire value chain is depleted in terms of inventory. And you will find that as the lockdown opens up in next 2-3 months, just to fill that gap, you will see a sudden surge in the demand, right? And as the people would kind of come in and start buying stuff, both essential as well as non-essential. But what would happen post that will depend upon how the economic scenario pans out, right? In medium to long time, I'm very optimistic that India will be absolutely on the growth path for next, at least a decade. But we need to weather this storm, if you call it that way, for next 6 to 9 months, if you ask me. Because what is likely to happen is you will see the downturn in terms of the demand which may come in because of a lot of unemployment which is there, a lot of people having pay cuts, a lot of industries not doing well, and in general for healthcare industry it will be lesser, let's put it that way, because it's essential and it is critical, and in this industry you would find it probably go little bit other way around depending upon segment where we are. But I'm just talking in general, that there could be a potential where the demand may drop in short to medium term, but then it will revive up depending upon how the economic package that the government, $300 billion economic package that the government has announced, how it kind of picks up and how it is getting implemented. So it's more likely to be a W recovery than a straight V or a U recovery. That's what I would feel, and we need to, in my view, preserve for the recovery and be prudent in the short term.
Okay, so I understand that point. Of course, no one knows in what shape or how the recovery will come. But if I go a little bit deeper in the question is that, and I can see that in my business today, I don't know what's coming ahead, but I know today what is in my control. What are these things from a finance perspective that you say these are my key KPIs or key performance indicators, which on a daily basis I'm looking at?
Yeah, so if that be the question, I think thanks for asking that. What we are currently looking at is relative progression of what we are doing in demand pickup, right? So we have created a in-house model where we are looking at the forecasting in terms of the top line coming based upon the demand, supply and GDP scenarios, and that we are tracking on a weekly basis, right, where we are looking as to how is the market kind of opening up. So we have a chart that we've kind of prepared for ourselves from mid-March till today, right, whereby week on week basis, because India is divided into 3 zones, right? So depending upon which zones open up, there are 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and depending upon that situation, how is the demand picking up? Is it better than what we expected? And accordingly, then we are looking at moving to the next month scenario. So it's a short-term currently view for looking at as to how things open up, and then we are looking and planning already for a medium to long-term, depending upon how the entire thing span out. Did I answer your question well, Nicholas?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Manish. Anyone else has a different way or similar way, but something to add?
Yeah. So, go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, Vineet.
All right. No, I was just saying that from a timing perspective, I think it's anybody's guess. I don't know whether it is VW or what shape it will, but I do believe from a medium to long term, it is going to be a positive story for India, right? The 2-3 reasons I want to highlight. One is certainly we see there's going to be a much more investment in healthcare, whether it is government or private, in the medium to long term, as I'm saying, not in the short term, but a much more investment in the healthcare. We are seeing that there's a lot of startup actually in the ecosystem that is developing on the healthcare side, right? More in the diagnostic, and actually which will actually help the primary healthcare centers and to make sure that people actually get identified what the disease is, and that primary healthcare becomes much better. And the third is innovative solutions that we are seeing, and my friend Manish here and his company has done the swab, the innovative solutions. I think there are a lot of innovative solutions that are going to come. And that is just an example. I'm sure there are multiple more innovative solutions that are on the way. So from medium to long term, I'm very bullish. I'm very positive as an eternal optimist. But in the short term, I think the challenge will remain. I think we need to navigate. I mentioned earlier in terms of how do we manage our cost in terms of having the discretionary spend, making sure that we track day to day, as Manish was also saying. We do have a war room. We've actually done hospital mapping by 3 green zone and red zone and orange zone, to make sure that we are able to track our team members, where are they going? And that war zone are actually tracking where the employees are currently, because a lot of people actually move to their hometown. So we actually tracked where the individual employee is, where that person is supposed to be, and to make sure that if he is in green zone, how do we make sure that he's able to serve the market? So I think we are doing that, what is required, and actually mapping it to make sure that as and when the recovery happens, we are absolutely there in the market.
Okay, perfect. Ajay, you wanted to add something to this?
I just want to add that, of course, all of us would have done some scenario building, right? What do we see in the next 15 days and 1 month and 3 months and so on? I think what we did is that, number one, in terms of KPI, what you mentioned, Nico, the KPI is on cost control, margins, and cash generation. I think these are 3 clear KPIs for the finance team, apart from the business partnering KPI, which is there. And what is important for us is that we are linking the cost to these scenarios. That if scenario X appears, then we are able to spend so much. If it is Y, then we can spend so much. And we have to tightly monitor and control that spend basis going forward. Because on one hand, where while you want to control cost, you also want to ensure that you don't eat up into the muscle, right? You cut down fat, no doubt, but muscle has to be protected. And the other thing which I would like to mention is that while we are building scenarios, it's also extremely important to revisit and retest whether your scenarios which you assumed yesterday is right today or not, and then do a course correction if required. So on a frequent basis, you have to keep on revisiting, because this is a situation where none of us have seen, right? You don't know what will happen tomorrow. So I think that revisiting and course correction is extremely important as you keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I like the concept, cut the fat but not the muscle. Rohit or Felix, anything to add on this?
Yeah, Nicholas, I just wanted to add a point here. As a company, right now, we are not at a cost control mode, because we have to also service being in the pharma space. So we are all out to ensure that the products reach the patients, and especially with not knowing how far the situation is going to last, the expense as far as the core business is concerned is on an aggressive basis right now. But what is important in the process, I think, is the whole work from home concept now has opened up a very new window. And with the whole digitization and work from home, hopefully in a medium to long run, this could be more of a permanent kind of a solution. And this actually could be a big contributor in terms of way we can control, again, what's referred to as a fixed cost. Relook at what is it that the fixed cost that we need, what is the kind of setup we can. And these are more of a permanent saving. We may not even work in a concept which we were in the past. So all of us as an organization, as a principle of working, are going to be a little different and forward-looking going forward in the long run.
Okay, I'll take a last question from Shah, or maybe Rohit, did you want to add something to this, or?
No, I think everybody's covered. So we also have our own KPIs, which we track procedure rates. We have that monitoring done, so we know how market's lifting. We have our assessment done on a weekly basis, which is for the current quarter, and then we revisit, to Ajay's point, the total year view on a regular basis. So it's similar. I think all of us need to be geared up to that, but we do have scenario planning, and we make sure that we plan our cost structure in a view that the worst case situation is there, so then we were well prepared. If situation improves, then we backtrack of some of the actions. So that's how we think.
Okay, so we got a lot of questions. I'm going to ask a last question from the Q&A. This is a question from Shalin Guenka, and whoever wants to pitch in can pitch in. Post the pandemic, what have been the changes in business continuity planning and operating plans, the critical scenario and advisory note on it? So do you see some changes in terms of BCP and in what you had before COVID and after COVID? I can ask Rohit, maybe if you have some views there.
Yeah, sure. So I think actually business continuity got really tested in the current scenario. I think this was the real test, that somebody was giving an example of fire drills and how actually fire happened and what we were able to do. So I think a lot of aspects, I think from a business continuity standpoint, the fact that all of us sitting in this webinar and people attending the call, as finance leaders, we closed the books remotely, and we were able to do that without coming to the office, is a testimony of the fact that as a finance function, we were able to get through the business continuity, right? So I think from a finance perspective, that was very important. All the systems, the ERPs, the tools that we need to close the books worked for us. The functions could work on a remote basis. And in most of our organization, work with the global teams to ensure the respective country where, the head of offices to close as per their requirements. For our case, it's going to be US GAAP, right? So I think, and it was a stat close for all of us. So I think that really, got tested, and we were able to come through well. On the finance side, and even on a business side, if you see, from a business continuity standpoint, manufacturing, did very well for us, and all of us, we are in the essential product category. So hence the manufacturing continued all this while with the limited staff coming 50% or below. So we had all the business continuity procedures, alternate people between the leadership groups. For example, my CEO would be, even before this lockdown happened, we started sitting in different offices between my CEO, CFO, and we had a plan within my function who's going to sit in which office, so that if one of us falls sick, we're able to manage the whole organization in terms of regular processes. So those were some of the stuff, Nicholas, that we did.
So just as a closing question, Felix, I know we spoke about legal entity and the reporting and the compliance and auditors from a stat perspective. You're currently doing everything online. If you can just give some insights there, what you're doing.
Statutory audit was not an easy session, but I think like Rohit again mentioned, we could really test a lot of our processes sitting offline. And it also facilitated the auditors to really take an independent view from wherever they are to see how systems are working without being led into some of these. One very practical example was a physical verification, which, even as per the institute guidelines, was a should and must. And getting the auditors to agree with what you want is not easy. And we've been on the audit side, so we know it. And even if you have to sell a case to them, they wouldn't care. But yeah, in all good humor, it was a challenge, and at least we could attempt and risk one place to check how this whole video conferencing wide physical verification happens. thankfully, the first one was a success and it actually went absolutely well. And now using this as the base, there are some sampling guidelines which the auditors have, which is going to be applied. So it looks like we can completely work remotely in all respects, and we don't have to look at the auditors anymore. Now the auditors have to look at us, So it's going to be a faceless system, processes who does what. It's over a phone call. It might be a 1-800 number soon to do an audit.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I close with this. Sophia, can you just put up the last question, which is a little bit of a question more towards recruitment, of course, and we are always keen to understand what's the overall hiring scenario per industry. So, which of the following best describes your intention towards hiring staff? So, this is what. Meanwhile, while people are answering this, let me ask a last question to each one of you. And I asked the question yesterday as well. Vineet, I'll start with you. Working from home or working from the office?
Oh, that's a difficult one. But I would say that when I initially started, I was finding it difficult. One is that not able to see your team and when you see it on a day-to-day basis. That was the first one. And then the second one was when you wanted to coordinate multiple stakeholders, not having them in the room, which we were used to, was more difficult actually. But I must say that as we went along in the journey of 2 months of working from home, we started to adjust to this new way of working and started to work better actually. I mean, my simple advice to everybody has been, and my team has been, is that you follow a simple, absolutely clear calendar for the day and not make it fluid. So I come at 8 o'clock in the morning into my office room, which is this room, and then plan my day accordingly. And I do have my fitness sessions in the morning and the family time in the evening, many a times, except some global calls and all. But yes, you have to have a discipline of ensuring that you follow a rigid calendar and make sure that you have a time for your personal side as well as for the family side. You should be able to do it. So I started enjoying it actually.
So working from home, I'll note that one down for you. Ajay.
Nico, what I personally feel is that too much of something is not good always, right? So having a balance is very important, whether you're working from home or in office. I think this balance is extremely important. And like Vineet said, even while you're working from home, having this clear demarcation, which many times is not possible, in terms of what is your work hour versus your home time, because practically what's happened is that a lot of your travel time has now got converted to work time, and you don't have at times even a lunch break, for example. You have your lunch while doing your calls, right? So I think the distinction between what is home and what is office has, in our case, has reduced. But having said that, you have to take out time for yourself, for your fitness. You have to also have empathy for your team members. At times you're on calls and you suddenly hear some child crying. So I think it's very important you show empathy towards your team and be supportive to them in the situation. And try to see if you can still carve out a specific, distinction between what is work and what is home.
Okay, so I say you're undecided, at this point in time. So Rohit, quick one. Let's go quickly through working from home or working from the office.
It depends if kids are going to school or not.
So if they go to school, definitely home. Is that what I understand from it?
Absolutely.
Great. Manish.
I think it will be mixed as we go forward, more towards work from home than work from office.
Okay, perfect. And last, Felix.
Mine is a slightly different one, Nicholas. I prefer to work from just outside of home.
Just outside of home? And just what does that mean?
Means you're not at home and you're not outside too. So, you have your space with no disturbance either from the outside or from the inside.
Okay.
No, okay. That's what I meant was... it's good to step out and work, but what my experience has been in the last couple of months is, I think as a team and as teams and as cross-functional teams, we've been much better to connect. There's been much better connectivity on work from home. And I guess the relationship has also changes with the way we interact across and within the team. So that has helped in a way. But yes, what I would miss is an infrequent visit to the office, or infrequent visit where we could actually meet and have a discussion. So yes, it's both for me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So I take away from that we still enjoy somewhere the work from home, but sometimes we need to be in the office as well. So thank you for joining us. We had 200 people also logging in today. This was our second series of our CFO roundtables, and I hope to see you soon in next week where we have a couple of other things lined up. Thank you, gentlemen, and have a nice day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.